On my cell phone. I've got it all the way up.
Okay.
We need a microphone.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Liz Whiting. We're going to call the Great Falls International Airport Authority Board to session. Present today, we have Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Hoven on the phone, and Commissioner Swathwood and myself. With that, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to start with the consent agenda. It's made up of day-to-day routine items that require action but do not appear to have significant public impact. And items may be pulled from any board member if you'd like to have separate discussion. So first of all, we have the approval of the board meeting minutes from May 2025. Do I go through all of them? Just go through all of them. Okay, all of a sudden I was like, wait, I just read that. Payroll checks totaling $100,960.86 for May 2025. The maintenance and operations checks numbered 28999 to 29054, totaling $221,268.91 for May of 2025. We also will approve the passenger facility charge totaling $72,996.27 for May 2025, and the financial reports for May 2025 that were all in the packet. Any questions, discussion?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll second.
And it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's do a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? With that, we will move on to agenda item number 1, the bid acceptance of the West Concourse Bid Package 2.
Yes, so bid package 2 has been bid out, and we remain very close to budget. We are going to remove the Gate 1 and Gate 2 roofing from the project. The bids, in looking at the bids, we think we can do better through a separate bid process. So we don't have the some of the overhead on there, and then also we think we can do a little bit better from a financial perspective on the bid price. So we're going to pull that out, but the rest of the project remains on budget. We're going to make up the difference where we need to cut about $50,000 out of the allowances on the project, which shouldn't be a problem. But we should be very close to budget now that we have the second set of bids. And then what from here, Steve, in terms of is this buy the project completely out, or do we have anything else to bid next year?
This project is ready to go. Everything on the project that we originally started with, that the board had approved on the budget, all of that has been bid. We're ready to go.
Yep. So this pretty much buys out the remainder of the project. As I said, we'll remain right on budget. We are going to pull the roofing out and do that through a separate project. But other than that, we should have pretty much everything bought out with this second bid package.
Can you define what you mean by cutting $50,000 out of allowances?
Yeah, so the project has allowances for things that you normally encounter during the project. Do you want to give some examples, Steve, of just what allowances, fireproofing, things like that?
So
or lump
what
sum?
we have in there currently is fireproofing. We have some temporary partition walls is an allowance. Repair of the parking lot and the rental area pavement, so if that was damaged, there's an allowance for that. And then in addition to, there's kind of a percentage that Dick Anderson always includes.
Contingency, more or less.
CCM, for unforeseen, because we can't go and tear everything apart and look at everything. So there's $196,000 in this bid schedule 2 that's for construction allowance for unforeseeables, and we see that we could pull some of that money back without impacting the project. So
So we're fairly confident we can deliver the project on the schedule the board's approved, now that we have these bids, and so the.
By accepting slightly more risk.
Right, we'll take a little bit more risk, but, I mean, I think we've done fairly good at managing the allowances in the last couple of projects with Dick Anderson, so, you know, in this one, I think, to me, it's not that complex of a project, compared to, for instance, when we were digging in through the back of the bag claim, that was an incredibly complex project, and setting up the airline, ticket counters and that kind of thing, so I think there's minimal risk here. I think we can manage it within that 50, by taking 50,000 out, manage it within what we have left in allowances and get it done. So this will buy out the last bid schedule, and we should have pretty much everything ready to go. Construction is scheduled to start when, Steve?
They'd like to start in August 4th was their original schedule, and I imagine that'll push maybe a little bit, but we've got, with United kind of being out of gate 3, we've got to get on that schedule and get going.
Awesome. Thanks. No further questions
Yep.
from me.
Someone like to make a motion?
On what specifically? I don't see a.
Accepting the
for this
bids.
item.
It's accepting the bids that we have in hand from Dick Anderson.
And that's the figure beginning at 1.8 as discussed on the front of their letter.
So 1.817 is bid schedule 1, and you guys have already accepted that one. I
Bid
believe
schedule's-
this one should be for 5.84.
Okay. I don't see that figure.
We don't have that sheet.
Should be,
We don't have number 1, we start with number 2 after the bid information.
Right, that's what I was referring to. I see the letter from Dick Anderson dated 14 April. I don't see the standard airport letterhead cover
Right.
sheet. That's why I asked.
yeah, we typically don't do a cover sheet for the bid acceptance,
I
but
just didn't
if we-
see where
yeah, if we
the
look
final
at,
figure was.
acceptance of GMP, should be in the letter. Page 104, page 204. I've got the task order for 795 on page 3 of 4. Do they have is there not a bid summary sheet?
It should be in the GMP letter.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, but it's not.
Didn't you have it on this schedule 1 and 2?
Yeah, so the sheet that Laura's holding up is the actual bid tabulation.
they
It
have
shows both bid schedules on there with alternatives.
We have that, but what Cameron's saying is that we don't have the typical sheet that you guys give us as our cover letter that explains the summary and then gives us the motion.
And we don't do that for the.
Yeah, when they get,
Accept.
right, when we accept bids, we literally accept the bid package or multiple bid packages if we have multiple bidders. So the summary of their bid,
Just makes it a little confusing for us to.
Yeah, and I also, and it's like, and I see the sheet that Laura pointed out, with
summarize
the cleanse, I guess, but I don't see a total figure of the, Steve referenced a 5 point something. I don't see that figure in here.
Steve, do you have the total figure?
The figure that we would be going with the options selected, like John had mentioned, the roof is not in there, and then some carpeting in gate 1 and gate 2 was pulled out of the project. That figure is $5,841,338.
Are we missing the back page to this? Is that what does it not have a?
They don't summarize it on their bid tab.
It's just line item by line item?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable, as long as it's like, as long as we make a motion, as long as the board can approve a specific figure,
And I
I'm
can,
confident in the staff's ability to stick to that figure regardless of whether it's written down. You said 5,841 what?
338, and I can provide that breakdown pulled out in a sheet if
We
that
have
would
the
help.
breakdown, we
Yeah,
just
I'm-
don't have the total.
No, with this exact figure,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable moving ahead now that with the exact figure. Is Commissioner Hutton actually cheering, or is that you?
Yeah, I
personally?
know I am.
Okay, yeah, well, if Madam Chair, if you're comfortable, then I'm happy to make a motion
Go ahead.
All right, I move that we accept the bids the bid as presented for amount not to exceed $5,841,338.
I second it. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, let's do a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Capital expense, the parking lot revenue machines.
Yes, so we're still working with Hub on the particulars of their parking lot bid. The total equipment cost, we can get everything done for $225,000, but we're still working with them on the credit card processing. We want to make sure we get the best deal we can for processing all the credit cards through the lot. So we're still working on that somewhat, but if we can work that out over the next month or so, we would like to proceed with replacing all the parking equipment, which would cost $225,000. And by doing that, that would get us ticket spitters, that would get us revenue payment stations, the gate arms, and everything we need to change over that parking system. The biggest benefit to us is it accommodates the new payment methods. So we would have tap, we'd actually have phone tap. We would have chip reader instead of swipe. Right now, you're seeing a transition over the next year or two. There'll be less and less swipe even coming on your credit cards. So eventually, we are going to have to make this transition. We think this is a compelling offer because they are giving us quite a discount for the equipment that we're going to sell them back. There are a number of airports that still depend on that equipment and will for a few more years, so they want the parts back. So we're getting about a $30,000 or so credit to give them the equipment back. It's actually less than we paid for the last round of revenue equipment when we bought it, I think it's about 7 years ago we figured, when we did a complete overhaul 7 years ago. And unfortunately, this equipment, 7 years is about as long a life as you're going to get out of it because it does get a tremendous amount of use. So we'd like to proceed with replacing the parking equipment for a cost not to exceed $225,000. It is possible that we can't work out the mechanisms with our vendor, in which case we would come back in the fall and tell the board we're going to go ahead with an RFP to look for a new vendor. If we really can't get a reasonable credit card processing setup, then we want to go out and look for an entirely new revenue control system. That'll require a new computer in the office and an entirely new setup. Probably we can't use our Clover anymore. We'll have to go to a different vendor for our handheld machine, but yeah, if we can get this to work at a similar cost, we want to go ahead with it. If not, then we'll come back in August and tell the board we're proceeding with an RFP.
Questions?
I move that we take staff recommendation and proceed with acquiring the equipment for a cost not to exceed $225,000.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Any further discussion? Let's do a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. New development, ground lease.
Oh, it is common use.
Or do you want me to hold,
Yeah.
hold for now?
Yeah, common use terminal equipment is the next one.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh.
So common use terminal equipment is essentially, we provide the computers for the airlines, and many airports are going that direction so that when we have seasonal carriers, they can come and go. In this case, what we'd like to do is go ahead and get queued equipment so we can set up a couple of our ticket counters to be ready for a seasonal airline. And then we also want to set up gate 3. Our plan right now would be to, once Delta vacates that gate within a day or two, we'd be swapping over to the queued equipment. We'd move United there temporarily and during construction so that they can operate off of that gate. Ultimately, we may move this queued equipment down to gate 5. So we'll go ahead and get the communications equipment run to 3 and 5. And then probably we'll move this equipment eventually down to gate 5 if Delta takes back gate 3. If Delta doesn't take back gate 3, then gate 3 would probably become our new seasonal gate. We expect, Delta likely will in the next year or two need that gate, but maybe not. They might find a way, even if Minneapolis comes back, to consolidate on one gate. Nonetheless, we want to have 2 or 3 gates available with queued equipment. rather than, if you think about it, this allows us to reuse a gate during the day. The example right now is Alaska only flies at 6 p.m. That means all day long that gate could be used by an overnight flight. Like if we had a California flight, that plane could arrive at 11 p.m., stay overnight, leave in the morning. And if we had common use of terminal equipment, everyone would be using the same computer, the same bag tag printer, everything, and that allows us to get better gate utilization. It basically is an electronic way to build capacity rather than building additional bricks and mortar. So better utilization is better for us, and so we'd like the $60,000 in order to begin our acute equipment purchases.
Questions from the committee? I would entertain a motion.
Move that we authorize staff to purchase and install common use terminal equipment on an airline gate and 2 ticket counters for a cost not to exceed $60,000.
I'll second.
I will second it.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Terry, were you an aye?
I did it.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Synchronized.
Okay, it was in unison.
It was a hard.
Thank you, that passes unanimously. Now, new development, ground lease.
Yeah, we were very excited yesterday to announce the Terminal 360. You can see a rendering over in the corner. Terminal 360 powered by Prolific Basketball Academy. The Prolific folks would like 3 acres, and so they plan to build a basketball gym. They're going to start with a single gym. Their ultimate plan is a 4-gym build out with a pro shop and weight room, and more kids activities and things like that inside. They really hope it'll eventually be kind of an all sports complex. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to really get something in the community we've been talking about. When I got here 15 years ago, there was the effort to build I think they Get Some Balls, Great Falls was the initiative. There were billboards all over town, not my phrasing, and now here we are being at the point of realizing that plan. They have the capital to begin development next spring. We've already filed the TIF application with the city to extend the utilities between the stub outs we built back in 2015 and the new utilities we constructed last year for the Peterbilt building. And so we'll connect those 2 lines. They are located about midway down the lines, kind of where our road that we built last year ends. So this development will be right there along the interstate, great visibility. We're real excited they were able to use the airport nod in the name, Terminal 360. I think that's kind of fun. But ideally in the future, this will be the premier location for basketball in the state. That host tournaments and things like that in our community. As we all know, we struggle to have enough gym space to have one tournament, much less 2 or 3 happen in one weekend, multi-sport type things. This will really be an answer to that. So we're super excited to work with this group and see them realizing a vision they've had in the community for a while now. So.
Awesome. Questions from the committee?
I move that we authorize the director to enter into the ground lease.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Is there any further discussion? No further discussion, I'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Capital purchase, bridge, crane.
Yeah, our phase 1 rod haul snow removal equipment building was constructed in 2015. Actually built the utility stubs that we're talking about that go across the highway there, or across the frontage road there, and will eventually serve Prolific and other development down the frontage road. The building was built with stubs on a couple of the supports so that we could put a bridge crane in. It was always in the plan to eventually get a bridge crane. We had hoped that we would be able to fund that with grant proceeds. Typically, it's hard to say typically anything anymore with the federal funds, but in the past, there were times when things like this could be funded with our grant funds. The FAA has currently determined that it's a maintenance activity and we can't use our grant funds, so we have to come back and recapitalize using our own reserve funds. But this will enable our folks. Right now we have a bent up hitch, for example. It'd be great to have the bridge crane to lift the back end of these vehicles up to work on that. We've got a bent up broom head that we need to straighten out. It'd be great to have the bridge head for that. But really, the on-the-fly broom changes will be one of the key things that this bridge crane will enable. Right now, what we do is we put the broom head up in the air, and our guys stack the wafers kind of on that broom head, and then they tip it back down. Not the fastest or safest way to be doing that. And so this bridge crane will enable a lot of our day-to-day maintenance, especially during snow season, to be much easier. It costs about $150,000 to actually get the crane itself. Most of the infrastructure is already there because we did build the building knowing we would eventually do this. And this is in the phase 1 part of the building. It covers the first, is it 2 or 3 bays, Steve? First 3 bays. So that'll be nice. We'll have those bays to add in for maintenance. The rest of the building will be more or less storage. Once we expand the building, we'll have all of our snow fleet in that building, and so really make it a much more capable building for us. So for $150,000, we'd ask the board to authorize me to go ahead with a bridge crane and the snow removal building.
Questions from the committee?
The $150,000, does that include installation?
Yeah, this will leave us with an operational crane.
Well, I move we spend $150,000 and buy it.
Is there a second?
Second motion to spend $150,000 to buy and install it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Chair Hoban, I thought you were gonna say that you wanted the bridge named after you and you were gonna pay for it. We could call it the Hoban Bridge. Hoban Crane Bridge.
Yeah. Okay, great, Rich.
Hey, you just keep that in mind.
He just has to put his logo on this.
There you go. All right, Customs and Border Patrol protection equipment demands.
Yes, so this is the same item we saw a number of months ago. We've been presented now, I think, with 4 different forms of agreement throughout the last few months. Things that the CBP says this is the agreement. I have signed 2 of them already that the board had previously seen. The one that's in the packet now is the not the last one we got, which was just the quote that was in the first board packet. It was labeled as agreement. So if that's sufficient, then we'll just go with the quote, and we'll buy the $75,000, $76,000 worth of equipment and the $10,000 a year, and that'll be our agreement. If it's insufficient, the person we've been working with is on vacation, has been for a week or so. So we're not sure when he sent that last agreement and said, this is what you need to sign, if that still holds true. I think he's back tomorrow. I leave tomorrow. So nonetheless, we're taking the extra step of bringing the last drafted agreement they gave us to the board so that over the next month or so, if they decide they need a written agreement, we have something. The written agreement they provided us with obligated the board to future purchases, which were non-specific, which is not good governance. And so we've made some red line changes that you see in there to say, we'll basically consider these things in the future, but we're not obligated to do them. Each one will be brought year by year, and the board will consider them at the time, which is what I think the public would expect from a public board, so that we can evaluate and give public process to it, allow anyone to come in and object to it. I think that's the way we need to do it. And so we've made these changes to the 3rd draft we got. And I've sent that back to them and said, here are our changes. We haven't heard anything back in a week now. So I'm not sure where exactly we are. As I said, the last thing they sent me was just the quote of equipment. And they said, you need to sign this agreement, which I did. So we may be done already, but in the event that they come back when the fellow's back in town next week and say, well, no, we really want you to sign the last written document we sent, we will have this one approved hopefully by the board so that we can work off of that draft. So what you see in the packet is Mick, our attorney, and myself have gone through the document and tried to clean it up for what we can do as a public agency, what we feel is good public process, and we bring it back to the board for your consideration that we'd be able to authorize us to execute this document or something substantially similar to this document if Customs comes back and Customs, just plural, comes back and says that they need a written document, we would have this ready to go.
So obviously, we're drowning in unknowns at this particular juncture. But in terms of the knowns, you're asking the board to commit to purchasing, what was it, the $75,600 in equipment?
Yes. And $10,000 a year in services, that includes their internet, and their Norton antivirus or whatever it is their firewall, all those things that you kind of have annually that you need to operate. They've told us that we can expect another major overhaul in the next 3 to 5 years. They think their computer equipment might last 3 to 5 years, so we'd have something similar in 3 to 5 years. They've also sort of put us on notice that they have a phone system that's aging, and that would likely need to come, out from a capital perspective, but they have no idea what that would cost, and they haven't asked for it yet. So I think that's a good example of, in the document they're proposing, they're just saying, well, the airport will just buy that when we tell you to. Not good governance. So what we want them to do is say, okay, by the middle of January every year, we'll present you with our needs. And then you can go to the board and have it authorized to spend, and we can have it installed by the end of the federal fiscal year.
Okay.
So that's kind of the process we're trying to get them into. We were kind of hoping we could say, well, we'll have a $15,000 a year allowance, and we'll just kind of continue forward, because that's an agreement that we could debate and consider, but an unknown of, hey, it's going to be something less than $200,000. Well, that's a substantial amount of money, for an organization like us.
So in other words, this seems to be functionally very similar to what you initially brought to the board of roughly $70,000 in initial upfront costs and then a $10,000 budget on our behalf to defray upcomings. Okay.
Yeah, I think the dollars have not changed. They had added in some ambiguous type of language about, and we'll bring you other things and you will do them. And that's where I kind of objected and said, we can't really govern that way.
Respectfully.
Right, let's just consider it at the time and give everybody the opportunity to comment on that and do it or not do it. And so that's kind of what we've taken the document they proposed last and honed it down to something that I would hope we could all live with.
And how is this different from the last one that we voted on?
The language is completely different in that they've added in these sort of future steps. They had proposed a bunch of things like, we would pay up to $200,000 a year.
I saw that email.
Yeah, and so we've cut most of that language down to basically just say, look, by January of every year, you will give us what your needs are, and then we will do our process locally to consider that. And so before, what it basically was, we want $76,000 and we need $10,000 a year in annual costs from our firewall and our LAN and all that stuff that you need to kind of operate. So that it was just plainly that. This agreement is more extensive in that they're kind of looking ahead and say, we're going to have other things we need. So it's a little more projective in its structure. And we've kind of honed that down to, okay, let's have a process whereby every year you kind of give us what you need and we'll bring it to the board and consider it. But we can't pre-elect that the board is going to pass that. We'll have to take it to the board, get it considered, and then go forward. So it's not tremendously different, but they told us the one that I signed the day they sent us this was null and void. So, and we've asked why, or if they could tell us, what, the necessity of that is, and they haven't answered that at all. They just sent us the quote and said, here, sign this, which I've done, because the board did see that quote, and in fact, we've had that in the board package several times. So I've signed that, and maybe that will be sufficient. I don't know. But what we've done is to try and meet all of the various needs at the various times they've sent them to us. We've gone back and taken their document and said, here are ways we could accept this document, and we will bring it back to the board and the public for them to look at it before we agree to sign it. So
okay.
It's not tremendously different. It's completely structurally different, and it has a little bit more language about what they would want to do in the future and how we're going to deal with that.
Nothing else from me, thanks.
Commissioner Thompson, how's your hair?
It's still on fire. What is the status of the communication of the two of us that have contacted the Sheehy and the Danes camp, have you heard information from those two camps?
They sent a letter basically saying, you need to work with the Great Falls Airport Authority to come up with some type of agreement. The airport's, trying to retain this, and it was a very short letter, and we haven't heard any feedback back from that. It seems like there's long lags between when we hear from CBP, so I assume that the congressional staff is working with CBP to kind of make sure that, they're not being too crazy, but we haven't heard anything specifically back from the delegation since they sent that letter. Basically just, here, we're sending this letter, we're telling them they need to work with the airport, and that's about the end of it.
Just as a theoretical question, is there anything to prevent customs from round filing that letter as soon as they get it? Because it sounds very nice that the delegation sent a letter.
As we've discussed over the last couple of years, the federal agencies are much more impervious to political questions than they were 10 years ago. And I think that's just a matter of fact. I mean, I can't tell you how many airports and lawsuits were filed over employee screening a year and a half ago, and they walked right through that. Even the RSP, we had 7 or 8 airports in several congressional districts complain that the Seattle office is the only one charging for overtime, which, the national parks all cost the same, right? I mean, you're paying the same IRS rate here as you do in Delaware. Typically the federal government has one fee, you pay for the same service no matter where you get it. But somehow, we now have this added charge in Seattle region, but not other places. Even the rules, just coming across the southern border, you have to stop at the first FIS facility that's available. On the northern border, you can overfly the mainland for hours and land somewhere, down in California, which just simply isn't allowed, coming through the southern border. So, we have these discrepancies. It doesn't seem as though the agencies are really trying to mitigate those or being called into action to, justify how we have these differences. I will say, across many regions, these charges are becoming the norm. We know Atlanta, some other airports in North Dakota, Idaho, other places have already, done these agreements. I don't know that they will reply to the delegation, or if the delegation will have any real bearing on this agreement. It doesn't seem they will.
Thanks.
A moment of silence, as we all hate this. Commissioner Thompson, have you heard from Randy recently about this issue?
I have not, I just have passed it on, and he's made it clear that he's passing it to the DC team.
Yeah.
When I first initially, we've had 2 conversations early on that first week after our meeting. I forwarded some email communication. The last one was when we got the 200,000. We're jacking it now to 200,000. They're not going to tell Randy specifically either.
Right.
Our local contacts, what they're doing and who they're talking to, but at least they're seeing the ongoing communication that John has continued to try to negotiate with them, and we're getting the same language from
Yes, I
the same
have
person.
similar with Senator Sheehy's office, so I will try to follow up again just to see. They were meeting in the middle of this month to talk about some of these issues,
So I guess my question would be, we already know that we've missed that deadline, the May 31st deadline, and so they said, then this is gonna wait until October 1st. So what behooves us not to wait another 30 or 60 days till our August meeting, till they iron out, because now you're signing multiple agreements, so I'm not even sure what we've locked ourselves into. And I'm not for an open checkbook of, we're going to allow them to tell us, we potentially may want this in the future, and not knowing what that is. I would prefer that they have to resubmit, if they want a new phone system, fine, submit that and we'll approve it as we go. But I'm not I'm not into open-ended, this is what we're gonna agree to for the next 5 years.
Well, we've locked down the dollar amounts. I mean, they're only gonna get the 76,000 and then 10,000 roughly a year that's in the agreement. Even in this agreement, we've done the same thing. We've taken out the language that allows them just to propose and obligate us to pay. That's what we've done with this draft. And so the dollar amounts aren't any different. What they had told us initially was this had to be kind of obligated by the second week of September, I believe it was. Or they simply wouldn't have the computer systems. This had to be done, I think the update had to be done by the second week of September, or they wouldn't have the systems to keep processing flights. So I think, I would say, I don't know what's going to happen next week. I mean, it could be that they're happy with what we've already, with the quote we've signed, and that's enough. When the fella comes back, that's our contact, he may say, no, we still need a written agreement. And that's why I've tried to get this written agreement in a form that we could accept, because knowing that the board won't meet again until August. So I do think there's a potential, that they could come back and say, well, you don't have a written agreement with us, so, you're going to lose international clearances for some period of time, or the worst case scenario would be now you've given up your grandfathered status in terms of the equipment you have and the facilities you have, and you have to meet our new standard. And as I think I've told the board in the past, the new GFIAA facilities that I'm aware of that have recently been commissioned are anywhere from 2 million to 7 million. So we definitely don't want to trip into, hey, look, now you have to meet the new requirements, because at that point there's no way we'd be able to fund it. I think there's, on their end, I don't think they're the type of organization that normally processes agreements. So I think they're struggling to figure out how to do that. And that's why we're getting these confusing, odd answers like, well, you should spend 2% of your income every year on IT, even though, our income over there is something like $5,000, maybe $8,000, which wouldn't even buy a Chromebook, as I said in the last email. So I think they're struggling to figure out how to do this, but I think they've probably been mandated to do this in order to keep the organizational, doing that particular clearance services. Our understanding is some of their computers are simply going to quit working with the Windows upgrade this fall, and so that's why they're trying to put this together so they can keep doing what they're doing.
Do you know what the outcome was of Cut Bank? Matt's story about how impacting that was for Cut Bank, $40,000 isn't even their entire budget, so.
I think they're gonna stop having customs is what I heard from the airport. That was their intention last I talked to them.
And I have one question, so we need to sign this one for the third time because they declared our last one was null and void?
Yeah, so we signed one that, and literally it was being transmitted. We got an email with a new one, and so they, for whatever reason, we've asked what was the matter with the last one that's already been signed. It's gone through the public process. They simply haven't answered, and so we've told them repeatedly our preference would be to stick with the old one because that had already gone through 2 board meetings. Without any guidance. After they sent this new one, I've gone in with Mick and we've tailored it to something that is acceptable, from our perspective in terms of procurement process and that type of thing. It's still the same dollar amounts, it just has different language. And so we've sent them the red line back about a week ago. We haven't heard anything back on the red line. Like I said, our main contact is out of office. I don't know when he comes back in what the outcome's going to be. I mean, we're still going to press to accept the last agreement because there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with the last one. But if he comes back and says, well, it's because we now need this language and I didn't have it in there before, okay, I mean, we all understand that. Occasionally, you miss something in an agreement, you have to fix it. So we would have this as a backup to say, okay, we can accept this language. It's been vetted, the public has seen it. The board has accepted it.
But the first one you signed and the one you brought to the board today are both acceptable.
Exactly.
I'm good.
Yeah, that's the idea is,
Acceptable to who?
the attorney.
The least
Because
terrible thing
I'm a little
about it.
confused. We said yes to one agreement that wasn't red line or read by Mick, and then you've redlined one.
No, we've always had them read by Nick. We, any agreement that comes in, we have the attorney review. But this,
But I asked you in the last meeting specifically, and you said no. I asked specifically if legal had looked at it, and you said no, and then we got the email with the red line on it. So I'm a little confused as to really where we are, and I'm not okay with approving, well, there better be some language here that if they say no this, then which agreement are we going back to? Because I'm getting the impression that you want us to walk out the door today and say, if they come back and respond and say no, then this one goes to play, and if this is to play, then this document goes to play. I want to know as a board member, what document am I approving that I'm going to feel comfortable with, and I'm just not going to give open, this is okay, based upon such and such. And they have us backed into a corner.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously backed into a corner, but again, as you can tell, I'm not really ready to give up the fight as well either. I dare you to take away our international airline at this point. So I have to leave this room, John, comfortable with which document are you asking us to approve today based upon their response? Or does there have to be a motion that says, if they come back with this, document A is gonna be the one that the board's gonna go to? Or I understand that you want the tools and resources today to be able to make a decision on the fly, because we are not going to be meeting until August. I totally get that. I just want to be clear when I walk out of this room today that I am comfortable and I know what I'm either going to approve or I'm not going to approve.
Maybe I don't understand the question. I mean, the last document was on the board agenda. I mean, Laura, do you remember if Nick reviewed that? I mean, we can look through the notes. I'm almost sure he has.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he
And so,
had.
this one, Mick and I collaborated on the draft this time and said, okay, here are the reasons this is unacceptable back to CBP. The dollar amounts are the same. The only difference in this document here is it has slightly different language that looks forward. The last two documents that they've sent, the initial one we got last fall, kind of said, we need these things now. And this one has more language. In the future, we're gonna need more things. The last couple of documents really haven't talked about the future. So, what we said in there is we can't just accept more things. We have to bring that back to the board at the time and process those then. The initial draft we got, this last one, had that $200,000, up to a $200,000 cap that we would do if they just told us they needed it. It was unacceptable language. We've gone through and combed it back out and said, okay, this document is in keeping with our process. So, the one document I signed is the exact same document that's been in the board packet several times. It's simply the quote. That's what they sent me most recently and said, you need to sign this agreement. And we said, okay, the quote, we've all looked at that. It's been in the board packet several times. That is acceptable. We'll sign that. If that's the only agreement you need, then we're done. We've also asked several times, the last agreement that was on the board packet, what's the matter with that? My guess is they're gonna come back and say, well, in the process of doing this, there's more language we need to have in the agreement. And so we've come back to the board and said, okay, here's more language that they say they need. We've tuned it up for our requirements, and now it's ready to be executed with the additional language. So, I mean, this isn't uncommon in the lease negotiation that, one party or the other comes back and says, oh, this is unacceptable language. Sometimes that happens after that's already gone to the governing body, and you have to come back and say, okay, we're proposing different language because they're saying it's not acceptable. I mean, it could happen certainly with Prolific, and they could come in this afternoon and say, hey, our lender says we need to have this language, and we would have to come back to a future meeting and say, okay, we've inserted this language, we've vetted it, and it looks like it's okay.
I clearly understand that. Are we talking about page 75 that says board meeting number 6, June 24th, 2025, that is the customs, it's got the customs letterhead on here, and it's blue lined instead of red lined of what the changes are. This is like the document that you guys have
Yeah, and actually,
modified.
Commissioner Holman had actually suggested some changes in there also. So, yeah, there's 3 sets of of people have suggested changes to the document that's in the board packet now.
So that's all I wanna know, is I wanna be clear, because now, all of these changes are happening, trying to keep up with them and follow them as the emails have been flowing, is a little difficult sometimes. So I just wanna reiterate, I wanna be clear as to what I'm agreeing to today.
Yes, so again, I mean, to the extent that the quote is all they need, then we've already signed that. That we've said, we're agreeing to spend this amount of money. They're telling us they need this form of agreement. So we've taken this form of agreement and changed it in order to be acceptable to our organization. It's something that our attorney says is acceptable. I've looked at it and said it's acceptable. And, so this is what we're saying, okay, if we have to have a written agreement, this is apparently the form of the written agreement that they're saying they can accept now. We think it's an acceptable form of agreement.
The footnote of that document that I just referenced has a date of 5/30/25 on it. I just want to note that. I believe that's the last document in this section of this document.
Yeah.
And Terry, I don't remember you specifically asking that in the last one, but I've gone through and Nick has been involved in the
He's actually in
last
the
ones as
email
well.
chain every time he did an
Exactly.
email.
I realize that. At the meeting, I asked the question, and you said no, and then it came in the email, then that was the first time that I saw Mick's red line in the email. So that confirmed to me that at some point between the meeting and those communications with Customs, Mick had redlined it, and I was good with that. I was pleased to see that had taken place.
I do have just kind of a random thought about this, because this is a very important issue, and I think it's been a source of huge frustration for you as your staff as well as us, and trying to represent the public interest. My thinking would be, my preference would be, I guess, that we go ahead and approve this latest draft with the changes that have been made to it. With the side note that any future changes would require another public meeting, even if that means we meet again in July, which I know we don't usually meet. But, I mean, if they're gonna keep dragging this out and we're gonna have to keep making changes, I think CBP's just gonna have to realize we have to work under our open meeting, public right to know, and so, that would be my preference, and I'm highly frustrated with this whole situation, and so I can't imagine how it must feel for those of you that it directly impacts, so that would be my preference.
And assuming that, we don't just go with the quote, this latest draft does allow, for any changes to their budget, what they need in the future, we are going to be coming back. And that's really what we should be doing, in my opinion, is, once a year, coming back and saying, is it still worth it?
Yeah.
We have, now they're asking for a phone system, and now they're asking for a security system. Because at some point, we have the new fee that we've put in place, we should be close to break even on the cost center. But at some point, we may not be able to charge enough to retain business and continue to make these upgrades.
So, John, is there language in here that should that arise, there is an exit plan, and we would cancel our relationship with CBP and become a regional airport?
Yeah, so if we can't make the equipment upgrades, what they're telling us is, at that point, they would terminate. We can also terminate, there is a termination clause in here. It's a 30-day plus 30-day effective termination, so either party could terminate.
Okay. Well, I move that we empower John to sign this and send it off.
Is there a second?
I already seconded this travesty once.
I will second it. Further discussion? Let's do an individual vote. Commissioner Swathwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoven,
I,
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Whiting, aye. Passes unanimously. With the understanding that if it continues to, if it changes again, I think we need to reconvene and deal with that. All right. Are there any Airport Authority Board comments before we excuse Chair Hoven?
I just want to say, sorry I couldn't be there and thanks for tolerating this call.
Thank you for joining us.
Are we not doing John's review today because we don't want to correct?
All right, thank you, Sean. Are there any additional public comments? Go ahead, please.
If I may, Susan Wolf with the City of Great Falls, I want to really commend the thinking of, we have to let them know it is a public process and it is subject to that public hearing, et cetera, and we, you can't forego that local process, which sometimes I feel that our federal entities don't understand that we do things differently, but we're required to. So I just commend you for wanting to make sure that that's made clear to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I think sometimes we don't get to the right people. We clearly do not have the right person to, and that's one of the things that I will tell you that Randy had assured me that the powers that be were taking it above the person that was sending John the communications, that they were going 2 to 3 levels above him and
That
the
was
federal
the,
government.
that was the communication I had from Sheehy's office too, so.
Yeah, they're trying. So,
Everything moves at the speed of molasses, yeah. All right, with that, Chair Hoven, you may be dismissed. We are gonna go back to the director's report and finish this part
Thank
of
you,
our,
Sean.
And no action will be taken.
and no action will be taken, so the rest is just informational.
Yes,
preparation.
back to the financials. We had another forecasting meeting this morning, even beyond the financials you have in there. And we anticipate the year end, we're gonna end up pretty close to the expense budget. I expect we might have $30,000, maybe $40,000 worth of savings, so that's good. That's not quite 1%, but somewhere in that vicinity short of the authorized budget. On the revenue side, we expect revenues to outperform budget. So we were thinking probably in the neighborhood of 7-8% over budget, very close to a record revenue year. When we were doing the budget last year, we didn't know for sure if Peterbilt would be, in the building. It's that long ago when we did the budget, and so now Peterbilt was in there the entire year, which was a surprise. Parking is outperformed. We did that small rate increase, kind of what I call an interday rate increase, which yielded better results. And Laura renegotiated the rental car contracts effective January, and so that's yielded quite a bit more revenue too. So a really positive financial year. I'm anxious to see the year-end financials because I think we're going to all be pleased with how the year ended up. On the passenger side, we had a fantastic May. Kind of out of nowhere, we ended up with about 6.5% growth, which was the best we've done calendar year-wise yet. And it looks as though we'll probably end the year, the fiscal year at the end of the month here, at record boardings. And so that's really exciting. We should be right around 193,000 boardings. The previous record's just shy of 192. So a couple thousand more. The previous record, though, unfortunately, was 2024 or 2014. So we're finally back up to where we were 10 years ago. But that's, I think, the interesting thing about it is we're doing all of that with our traditional air service. So we haven't, we have Chicago, which we didn't have in 2014, but in 14 we had Frontier. So, more or less what's happened is as the planes have gotten larger, we're selling more seats through the hubs that Great Falls has traditionally had. So when you look at the spring schedule, I said in the previous meeting, we were up about 38% on seats from Delta Airlines because of the transition to 76-seat planes. Because of some weakness or perceived weakness in the economic outlook, we're losing that Minneapolis flight in September, but Delta still has 4% more seats in this fall than they had in 2019. So we're still going to have enough capacity to continue to grow. In addition to Delta's capacity, we also have the 76-seaters to Denver. And in fact, in talking to United, they're going to keep the Airbus all the way through October. And it looks like they're going to transition that to one Airbus and one RJ, which means we'll have more fall capacity from United than we've ever had. So I think when looking ahead at the remainder of the calendar year, we can anticipate boardings that may not decline. We had previously thought we would have a slight decline, about 8% decline. That may not actually happen. That's in the budget that way, but we may not actually see that. So when you look at the culmination of all the drivers, we've got larger planes this summer than we had in 2019, but in 2019 we had 2 Alaska, we actually had 2 Alaska last summer. We still have enough seating capacity that we may not miss that in the numbers. So as we see July and August, there's enough capacity that was left over last summer on the Salt Lake City flights in particular that we could absorb all that capacity and still have flat or even increasing passengers. So that's the positive news, is despite kind of funneling down of flights on these larger planes, there was enough unfilled capacity in the previous year that we can still potentially see passenger growth. So I'm hopeful by the end of the calendar year, it might still be a record calendar year. We're certainly off to a good half, the first half of this year. There's a potential that we may see a slight decline, but I'm now thinking it's probably more in the neighborhood of 3 or 4% compared to the budget number we had of 8 or 9%. So that's encouraging. The airlines were more positive at Jumpstart. I attended the Indianapolis Jumpstart at the beginning of the month. At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of negativity, a lot of forecasting of downturns. It seems as though the airlines now are kind of reversing that. They're seeing a more upbeat fall and winter schedule, and they're still all pruning back quite a bit, but we're hearing a lot of good indicators for 26. So the airlines expect the airline deliveries to kind of pick up in the next year. And as that picks up, I do think they'll be aggressive in putting new capacity in. Surprisingly, we had some very positive conversations from a couple airlines that have not been so positive the last year or so. They're looking at a couple new routes. We had sent some data last week. Some kind of unexpected opportunities popped up. I think we have a couple opportunities now to continue to push forward with California direct service in the summer. We'll continue to follow up on those conversations at the September meetings over in Kalispell. And I do think there's a decent chance we could see some additional capacity next year, particularly if Minneapolis doesn't come back to the schedule, which if I had to handicap that right now, I'd say there's probably a 60% chance we'll see Minneapolis next summer, because Delta has told me that our flights are full this summer, and the look forward on Salt Lake looks really good for fall. They're really anticipating that it may take us a while to absorb the Salt Lake City capacity with 3 76-seaters a day. Going from a 50 to 3 76-seaters, that's 30,000 seats a year. That is a lot for our market. But we seem to be filling it. So if, in fact, we can fill that as we get into Christmas, I do think we'll see Minneapolis next summer. So that looks good. If Minneapolis doesn't come back, I think we have a couple other opportunities, including expanded Chicago service, which the airlines are looking at and watching that Delta indicator to potentially plan more capacity for us eastbound. So that's the good news, is the market right now is strong. The airlines see that there's strength. Interestingly, United is performing substantially better in loads and in fare this summer than it was last year, so they're very positive on that route. So I think there's a lot of encouraging things on the air service side as we kind of close out this fiscal year and look at the fiscal year ahead. I think the forecast is a little better than what we had anticipated in the budget. So that's very positive going forward. On the project side, we continue to work forward on the snow equipment building. We're going to be starting work there over the summer. I think that we actually talked yesterday, the start date's going to be July 21st. And so we should be more or less cased in by the end of September, early October, and then the project will be complete in February. So We should have pretty much everything out of the way of snow operations by the time we get to snow operations, and just be working to finish out those interiors and get the building completed. So excited to see that project coming up. With the West Concourse, we're going to be doing some work towards the end of the summer also. We're working with United right now on a gate move that will enable us to have the least amount of impacts on their operation. We're hoping we can sort that out. They would move in September, and they would be there at least until January on gate 3. So that's a good potential there to get them out of the construction zone so that we can get that area enclosed and expanded down at their end of the building. Delta really doesn't have to move off of gate 2 because we're moving gate 2. So there really isn't much of an impact to them down at gate 2. So that project seems to be coming together pretty well. We're still wrapping up some fit and finish things on the canopy. We've got a couple of leaks in the ceiling that we've got to address with the contractor. The fireplace, they did come up and tape the corners of that, but it's already sooted up again, so that doesn't seem to be the problem. We're going to have to eventually, I think, probably warranty that or something. They've got to come figure something out because we're building up too much carbon. And what you can see in the firebox is replicated on the chimney, and that's our bigger concern because if we're sending a lot of soot up into that chimney, obviously that can be a concerning issue. The roofing materials here, I saw actually the roofing crews were here today. They're getting ready. You probably saw up front, they've got a fenced out area. They're going to put a crane in there for a few days to get all that heavy roofing material up on top. So we're going to have all that roofing hopefully starting next week. It was going to be this week, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. They've gotten tied up over at Mang with some roofing issues, finishing that up over there. They've had to replace a couple subcontractors, and so hopefully we'll get them going here and get that roof done in the next few months. I think that's it on the capital side, and I don't know if anyone has any other questions.
Answered all mine.
We continue to have a lot of prospects contacting us. We actually have a prospect here right now, Canadian prospect, looking at our land. The tariffs and the uncertainty around the tariffs seems to kind of be percolating interest. This one in particular is another. They have some uncertainty around the tariffs that they're looking to nail down and maybe have a U.S. location. And so I think I'm encouraged that maybe by the time we get to fall, we'll be bringing in a couple prospects to the board. It's still in my plan that we would come back to the board this fall and talk about a 6 condo expansion, which I think would be tremendous to get us a little bit ahead of the demand. We've had a few kind of slip through our fingers this year that needed space right now, and they have a broad regional net, so I think they probably went to another community. But I think if we had a couple in hand, we could get them leased pretty quick. I even think this guy we're talking to today, if we had space ready to go, I think they would be a potential new tenant. I still think that's the plan. We've submitted our TIF application to the city. We're working through a few questions they had, and we'll be before the Planning Commission hopefully over the summer, and then moving that forward for construction. If you recall, the budget for that's about $650,000. There's about $300,000 left that the city says we can put towards this project. So we'll probably go ahead and build the utilities that we can't get TIF funding for, like the electric and gas, as expediently as we can. That'll enable Prolific to build on a little faster schedule when they go to get their steel up next year. If they could have some electric on site and be ready with utility hookups.
All right. Any other comments? No further business to come before the board. I declare the meeting adjourned. Should we take a short break or should we keep moving? Preference? Pardon?
I'm good.
Keep going.
Your